Hey guys, it's Size, back on the Dragonflight beta with another dungeon walkthrough, the Ruby Life Pulls. I'll be putting up my talents at the start of the dungeon. You can pause now and feel free to have a look at the build that I was playing. I have gone for a bit of a different build this time round, mainly based around Mindseer. I've given it a hard time in the past and previous videos because the damage just wasn't there. But I did have another little jig around with the talents, and I thought maybe if I just put my all into it every other GCD when I have full insanity bar, if I just send it, and it did help that the tank that we had was doing pretty decent sized pulls, and I must say the damage wasn't bad. I don't think Mindseer does enough damage, but I don't think it's bad. I think it actually competes as long as you're spending all the insanity on AoE on it. There are some scenarios where you're going to be using single target DPs and such, but I'll put the Warcraftlogs at the end of the dungeon and you'll be surprised at how much damage Mindseer does. But with that, we'll get into the bosses. Thank you for your time and thank you for watching. Coming up first is Melidrussa Chillworn. Melidrussa will apply a debuff called Primal Chill, reducing your movement speed by 3% per stack. At 5 stacks, the player will be frozen solid and will need dispelled. As you can see, she's also casting Chill Storm. It summons a pool of water on the ground that will slowly pull the players in. If you get pulled in, you'll be knocked back and be dealt a significant amount of frost damage. Throughout the fight, Melidrussa will also spawn the whelps around the room. You can see there are 4 lots of eggs, and depending on how long the fight is, depends on how many stacks of ads you'll get. Melidrussa will also cast Ice Blast. It's a frontal cone. Quite a few bosses in this expansion have frontal cones, and this is no different. And that's it for the remainder of this fight. It's just rinse and repeat. I will say, even though the dungeon is sped up, if you just watch, you can clearly see the pulls that the tank was doing was not normal for the dungeons that I've done in the past. It made it a lot more fun for sure, but it also will inflate the amount of damage the AoE abilities are doing, and I think this is kind of what gave me the idea that Mindseer was actually rather competitive even without damage buffs. But again, if this is what it takes for Mindseer to be competitive, you're not always going to be able to do these kind of pulls. At least not until we're fully geared. But we'll have a look at the Warcraftlogs at the end, and we'll have a look together and see what damage it was actually doing, and maybe how many targets it will take before it'll become competitive enough to be used as a talent. Coming up next is Kokia Blazehoof. This boss will start with 80 to 90 energy, and when it reaches 100 energy, it'll summon a fire elemental on a player location, inflicting damage to all people who stand in it. It's up on the screen now. If you stand in it, it'll do massive AoE damage, and if the ad doesn't die, it'll keep pulsing AoE fire damage that the healer's going to have to keep up with. When the ad is killed, it'll release that AoE fire circle that you saw at the start, and you again have to move out. The boss also casts Molten Boulder. It's a frontal ability on a targeted player. If you get hit by it, it'll knock you back, stun you, and do a decent bit of damage, but it is rather easy to dodge. The cast time's quite forgivable. The boss also casts Searing Blows. It's a tank ability, but it can be applied to any player that the boss is targeting at the time. It'll attack 4 times over 3 seconds, applying a bleed debuff each time it hits, stacking up. So your healer needs to keep an eye on the tank for this one. The last boss of the dungeon, Kyrakka and Erkhart, are 2 target encounter, and each boss does different abilities. Erkhart's main ability is Winds of Change. It's a focused pushback that you're going to have to run against, use a movement speed increase and dodge, so that you're making sure you're not going to get caught in a bad position when Kyrakka lands and starts his ability set as well. Kyrakka has many different fight abilities. There's the frontal cone you've just seen, there's these flame pools on the floor, and if you get hit by any ability from this boss, it will apply Inner Inferno. It will ignite fire damage on any player that's hit, stacking, and with each stack the duration of the dot increases. While you have this dot active, each player will be erupting 5 yards as fire damage, so you want to make sure you're not stacking with other players while you have this debuff. It makes dodging other abilities much more important, so that the healing throughput isn't required, and you can help do a bit of damage to get through the boss quicker. Kyrakka will also do Flame Spit. It'll spit out fire towards a targeted player. It is avoidable by everybody else, so you just need to make sure you're moving when the ability lands. But that's it for this dungeon, guys. Hey guys, it's Size. We're just going to be looking through the Warcraftlogs link that we've got here for this dungeon that you've just seen. We're going to be having a quick look through my own damage breakdown, so we can have a look at what damage was being put out by the priest. So if we just quickly go into encounters and trash, this is all damage throughout the entire dungeon, not just bosses. And again, you can see the clear difference in Mindseer damage, especially from previous dungeon runs that I've done, where Mindseer was barely above Mind Games in some encounters, even lower. I did try and completely change my playstyle and how I decided on when I was going to press Mindseer in this dungeon. It did help that we had a tank that was continuously pulling, because I had my dots up from Shadow Crash each time that it was taking of me insanity. By the time I stopped and I was able to do damage, I had a full insanity bar so that I could just drain that with Mindseer. It felt really nice, but at the same time I felt like I was kind of relying on the crits before I'd actually see the decent damage that I wanted to see in the dungeon. But again, That doesn't make it bad, it just means that it needs a little bit of tweaking from Blizzard to ensure that it feels good to press. That's the main thing, right? You want an ability to feel good when you press it. You don't just want to press it and just be waiting for it to finish. You want to press it and think, I'm actually contributing here. I'm not just standing here and just waiting for the pack to die. I'm actually actively dealing this damage. Even with this build, I still find myself wanting to apply dots, even outside of Shadow Crash. You know, if a new pack's pulled, or if Shadow Crash is on cooldown and I can't quite get the dots out, I'm still applying the dots to make sure I'm getting that insanity generation so that I can Mindseer. Again, it's a mindset thing. I've been focusing on not Mindseering throughout the expansion so far. I've been using the Devouring Plagues, I've been using prio damage, trying to kill a priority target. But for this dungeon, I will say it was fun. And if I can just get a comparison of another dungeon that we did. Neltharis, here we go. Damage done. You can see the difference, right? So Mindseer and Neltharis was doing less than a trinket. 7 casts versus 28. It's a big difference. And this is a quick dungeon as well. If the dungeon was longer, it would have been more casts. But it's a big comparison. You're missing out on so much damage by not Mindseering. And at the same time, if we look at the Devouring Plague cast, 39 casts versus 100, and it is about 1.2 mil damage difference. But instead, you're making up for that damage with Mindseer, which did the 1.2 mil. So you're not technically losing out much at all. It may feel like it is, it may look like it on paper, but the Mindseer is making up for the lack of Devouring Plague damage. And even then, on boss fights, Devouring Plague's still going to be on top. You're not sacrificing anything. And I think that's kind of where people are struggling to understand what Shadow Priest is trying to do now. I'm of the opinion that Shadow will always be good at one or the other. Shadow Priest will always have a really good single target or really good cleave, spread AoE. And I'm happy with that. I'm happy that in the talent tree we are encouraged to choose one and stick with it. Some people aren't, some people want the best of both worlds. But at least in Dragonflight we actually have different talent builds that let us pick and choose what we want to do. It's that bit of choice that we haven't had in the past. It's always been this expansion Blizzard have scaled you in made your class to the point where, okay, Surrender to Madness and Legion, you're a single target god. That's all you're going to be doing. Don't worry about cleaving. Yeah, you put dots up and you want insanity gen from cleaving, but your whole damage is on a single target. And then we go into Shadowlands. Okay, spread cleave is your thing now. You're not just a full single target player. Your spread cleave damage is one of the highest in the game. And then as the expansion went on, and we scaled, as everybody knows Shadow Priest scales really well, we did start seeing that single target damage coming out. But I'm happy with it, guys. You know, some more changes can be made for sure. That I'm sure Blizzard are going to pick up on, because the feedback that the Shadow community is given is quite high compared to some other classes. So I'm really happy about that, at least. But I'm happy. You know, these dungeon runs are some of the most fun that I've had in ages. And doing these little Warcraft log damage breakdowns are even better. I will be putting the link for the Warcraft logs down below, so if you want to have a little more of an in-depth look, for example, seeing when I was using my Shadow Word Death to make the use of the Shadow Word Death cleave, when I was popping PI, and who I was using PI on, because again it changed. I was testing out different targets, so I tried putting it on the Evoker to see what it was like. I put it on the Rogue, because the Rogue has a talent that reduces cooldowns anyway. So he was getting the PI and his CDR as well, so it meant he had more time on his abilities. But again, you can see all this in the logs. I just wanted to try out Mindseer and see how different it felt in comparison to just being a full single target build. And again, I'm going to be trying out different talent builds. We're going to look at it together. Hopefully you guys keep commenting and asking about Shadow Priest and asking me to test different things and giving me ideas, because I love that. I love being able to have access to the beta. And I know the PTR's up now, so you can test talent builds. But you don't get an idea of how it feels in a dungeon environment, right? Even heroic dungeons, things die really quick, but at least I get to see that in a dungeon environment, unlike you guys. So please, 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 comment, ask away. I'll help where I can. I'll show what I can. You know, some of these videos I've been improving just by having a little bit of feedback and somebody saying, oh, can you put your talent at the start, or can you do a Warcraftlogs walkthrough at the end? I'm more than happy to do that, providing that's what you guys want. And I really appreciate all the support you guys have given me recently. You know, the views have been astronomical, my subs are going up, which I'm really happy about, and it's really important to me, because then that's where I get my feedback from. The people commenting are subs that, you know, I've stuck around from the first couple of videos that were shaky. I was nervous, the content wasn't great, but they were interested in it. You know, they were happy to see where I was going to go, and it means a lot to me, guys, so thank you very much. But with that, I think I will throw the Warcraftlogs link in the description for you. If there's any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And I do think Blizzard actually put off some shadow changes. I am going to be putting off a video, a sort of shadow discussion, where I go through where shadow was in Shadowlands, where it is in Dragonflight, the positives, the negatives to the changes, how it's played now versus then, if it feels nice to play, because I haven't seen a lot of videos with how shadow feels. There's loads of videos on the changes, but nobody's specifically said this is how shadow feels to play. And I really want to dive into that, because a lot of people that are shadow mains because it feels good. You know, they're not shadow mains because it's the best spec in the game, because it's not. You know, there's loads of flaws. But I think if more people knew how shadow felt to play, they'd be more interested to at least give it a go. So, without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, night, wherever you are in the world, and take care.